While it's a bit more difficult to estimate the number of Ukrainian individuals and families already resettling in Lincoln, the number is believed to be approximately 65. At this time, Ukrainian families require sponsorship by another family or entity in the country to come into the United States, which is a slightly different process and support structure than exists for refugee families from Afghanistan and other countries. It also makes it a bit difficult to estimate the number of additional families that may come into Lincoln. But we suspect and have heard from those who are close to the Ukrainian community here in Lincoln that there could be an additional 150 to 200 arriving. But our goal is that every family has an opportunity to successfully resettle and start off strong in our community, and the opportunities to assist families is right before us. In conversations with leaders from organizations across the city who've been deeply involved in supporting families, we've been inquiring about areas of greatest ongoing need and asking how our community as a whole can be a support to their efforts. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So to share a little bit more about our community's commitment, I would first like to welcome TJ McDowell, who is mayoral aide to Lincoln Mayor Leary Gaylor Baird, to the podium. TJ?
Thank you. It's a beautiful day out. It's great to look out and see so many familiar faces. I want to start by thanking Megan and the United Way for initiating the Lincoln Resettlement Fund. This work aligns closely with Mayor Gaylor Baird's One Lincoln initiative. The goal of One Lincoln is to spread a culture of equity, inclusion, and belonging throughout our city. Lincoln has long welcomed immigrants and refugees and helped them find a sense of belonging in the social, economic, and civic fabric of our community. This history goes back to the 1980s, when Lincoln became a federally designated resettlement site and resettled over 5,500 Vietnamese refugees. My personal educational experience benefited from this influx of Vietnamese refugees to our community in the late 1980s. I was a student at Lincoln High when many of the Vietnamese students attended. We had a multicultural student organization that provided opportunity for me to learn about the culture and experiences of my Vietnamese classmates. My worldview was broadened, my understanding of diversity was deepened, and by this exposure to refugees and hearing their powerful stories. By 1993, our community was receiving approximately 1,200 refugees per year. The U.S. Department of State designated Lincoln as a refugee-friendly city in the 1990s, recognizing our efforts to welcome refugees. Lincoln is and should be very proud of our history of embracing immigrants and refugees. The Mayor's office is grateful for this fundraising effort that will provide needed resources to local organizations that provide support to immigrants and refugees. Thank you again, and welcome. Dr. Marilyn Moore.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. This is a really special day to reaffirm the commitment of this community and its many nonprofit organizations that support everyone who lives in Lincoln and calls Lincoln home. We have the opportunity now to welcome 2 new immigrant groups to our community and embrace them within the life of the community. This has taken on personal meaning for me as I have been involved in a process the last several months as our church has supported an immigrant family from Afghanistan. And I believe that this family is typical of many Afghani families who are relocating here. It's a family of a mom and dad and 6 children. The 6 children are 10 and younger. 3 are in school and 3 are in preschool. And they have received excellent health care and all of the initial health processes through the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department. The dad speaks English fairly fluently. The mom is in classes from Lincoln Literacy. Thank you, PlayNet, for making sure that that happens. The children are in English language learner classes in kindergarten, 2nd and 3rd grade, and the other 3 will be in those classes as they enter school. The challenges of the family have been considerable. Housing for a family of 6 is not easy to find, and we all know the constraints of housing in the city of Lincoln right now. Jobs are plentiful. Transportation is a challenge. The dad has just started a job. The shift is 4 p.m. to midnight, which works really well with the family because that means he's available during the day because he's the translator of the family right now and can help navigate can get to work, getting home from work at midnight is a bit of a challenge. And then childcare, well, the mom is in literacy classes, is also a need. All of these are needs that will be addressed through the formation of this new fund. And it is a fund that is so needed, and I'm confident that the local community will be generous, as it always is, to the newcomers to our community. The particular interest of the Community Health Endowment rests with our priorities of addressing disparities in health outcomes for different populations in the community. And our refugee and immigrant families bring a multitude of challenges in their own lives that would be normally predictors of disparate health outcomes. Lower in income, disruptive situations from which they came, entering a new society with all kinds of new cultural norms and values to figure out. And the Community Health Endowment is committed to supporting families as they enter this community, and in so doing to address the disparities in health outcomes. So we are glad to be a part of this effort. And now I'm really pleased to introduce to you Moshe Kier, who is a member of the United Way Board and has his own story to tell. Please welcome Mo.
Thank you all for having me here. Lots of familiar faces here, so that's good to see. My name is Moshe Kier. Can you hear me? Mic one, test one. All right, we're good. So I'm going to share with you all a couple of things. My family was a Kurdish refugee that moved here. So I'm going to go over a couple of things with you all. For refugee families from Afghanistan, resettlement agencies are set up to provide 90 days of support. But they found out that the complexity of these needs, along with the challenges of a shorter period of preparation and a larger than normal volume, needs ongoing support from community nonprofits. Discussions with those closely invested in supporting resettling individuals, families that have helped identify areas where immediate impact is possible by building upon existing resources through short-term, 12 months, funding supports. Supportive entities simultaneously seek to support larger system-level needs. Okay, let me just read you all my life story and see how that changes. So, my family, my dad was a Kurdish refugee. He served in the Iraqi army for 2 years. He spent a year in. After spending a year in, they found out that he was Kurdish. They threw him in prison. He spent the next 7 years in prison. There were 3,000 prisoners, and only 500 survived. He made it. He made it back home, spent an hour with my mother, heard a knock on the door. Opens up the door, it's the backing party of the Iraqi regime. They told him that he needed to pack up everything and get out of the country. He didn't have an option to take anything with him. He just packed up whatever they had, jumped in the back of the pickup truck, and ran to the nearest country, which was Afghanistan, or excuse me, Iran. We spent 6 months in Iran. Didn't know the language, didn't know the culture. After 6 months, they were asked to provide documents. They couldn't provide that. So they had to do it again. So to get out of the country. So they packed up everything and went to the nearest country, which was Afghanistan. Some families were fortunate to make it, some families were not. They made it to Afghanistan where they stayed for a couple of months. They couldn't claim asylum, so the next country they went to was Pakistan, where they could claim asylum. I was born in a refugee camp where I spent the next 8.5 years. We didn't know the language, we didn't know the culture of Pakistan, but we had to learn it. I don't want anybody else going through that same struggle as I did in my family. Having a second meal was a blessing. Having a third one was probably on my birthday. But we made it. We survived. We moved here to the U.S. with the support of Lutheran Family Services. And there's thousands of other refugees that have the same story as mine. My dad was working 2 jobs here. My mom was working 2 jobs. And we only had support for 90 days. We don't know the culture. We don't know the language. And we have to learn all this. 90 days of support is awesome. But I wanted to see my father. I wanted to see my mom. A few years down the road, we ended up moving to Nebraska, where we settled. And from 2004, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, final stages. She passed away, and I was at the age of 14, she passed away. Now, when we moved here, she was working so much, my dad was working so much. I I wish I would have spent a little more time with her. Now, what this is going to do, this hits a soft spot just because it's personal to me, but these refugees that come here are the first immigrants. Your families, you might not be the first, but I promise you, your families that came from a different country here. We're all refugees. If you look to your left, if you look to your right, the diversity here, we're all refugees here. This is what makes America so great. Okay? Families like mine want to contribute to society. My dad just retired. He spent over 20 years with Lincoln Public Schools. My sister works at Lincoln Public Schools in building their own practice. My older brother owns his trucking company. My little brother works at UNL. We're paying their taxes. We're getting involved in the community. I decided to join the board of directors to help out the community as well, and also with Living Family Services I've joined. But we contribute to society. We want to live the American dream. We just needed a little bit of help to get started. This fund is going to change lives for families. Resettling in Lincoln, I know it did mine. Thank you all so much. I'm going to introduce Alec, who's the president of Lincoln Community Foundation. Thank you all so much for having me today.
I've heard Bo's story like 3 times. It never gets old. It's truly inspiring. There's 30,000 just like it here in Lincoln. So, at the Lincoln Community Foundation, our job is to grow generosity in Lincoln and among Lincolnites for the purpose for the social and economic prosperity of Lincoln. And everyone in Lincoln should be afforded the opportunity for economic and social prosperity. And that certainly applies to our new neighbors and families that have been and are and will soon call Lincoln home. And just like the many refugee families before them, these individuals are our neighbors, our colleagues, our co-workers, small business owners, and all other elements of society that we value. Prosperity, though, in this circumstance is realized because of a successful transition to a new community and certainly a new way of life. And that path to prosperity, it takes time. Certainly much longer than the 90 days being afforded to Afghan families and the 0 days afforded to Ukrainian families in this circumstance. And it takes support. And so in this community, we're very fortunate to have a number of organizations that do that work, provide that support, provide that coaching, provide that pathway, that transition that's needed. And it's our job as a community then to express our generosity that's in our hearts to provide those organizations with the resources necessary to do the work that they do. And so that's the message that I'm here to share today, is that join us in our generosity that we provided on behalf of the Lincoln Community Foundation and on behalf of the donors of the Lincoln Community Foundation. We have provided a seed contribution to this fund, and we're proud to do that. We will be encouraging our donors and our fund holders and educating them about the refugee circumstances and connecting them to this opportunity to support this really important fund. And we'll also be assisting with the disbursement of the fund. So again, generosity is fundamental when we think about economic and social prosperity in this community, and that generosity certainly needs